Anyone from Orlando? All right. Hello. Ooh. Orlando! We're really grateful for the Tampa folks to come out, and also the Corner Club for hosting this event. Anyone from anywhere besides Tampa and Orlando? Miami. Naples in the house. We really appreciate all those that have traveled to come out to this event. We're very, very grateful. I'm going to give it a few more minutes before we get started. Everyone can kind of continue chattering amongst yourselves. It's all right.
And do actually come and move to the front. There's seats up here. It does not need to be standing room only. There's still like 5 seats.
We got a seat in the corner.
Everyone become very close friends. This is a small venue, and many people are very interested in the ACP's take on women under socialism. Yeah, if you can move in as well, so it's not awkward for people to get in.
Are you an ACP? Oh, because your shirt. Oh, I haven't met you.
Hey, perfect. He lives in Naples.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Look at that. Oh, we're all so close. True collective spirit. Did you guys just come in from the cafe? Were you here? Are you here for the event, or were you just at the cafe? Oh, okay, cool. Are you guys from Tampa? Okay, sick. What people to left? Who are we looking for? Oh, yeah, where are y'all from? Okay, cool. And you saw the flyer. Okay,
OMG.
sick.
Thank you for coming.
I think we're good to start.
All right, y'all. Everyone's locked in from outside, right? Hi, Frankie. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Women Under Socialism EduForum. Thanks for being here. My name is Kali, and I'm a proud member of the American Communist Party. ACP! Beautiful. The ACP seeks to be the leading political force for people in the United States. The party that guides and organizes the American working class towards political sovereignty and actualizing the nation that we as working people deserve to live under. We believe that this can only be accomplished through a true vanguard party. The American Communist Party is distinctly anti-duopoly. We will never capitulate to the Democratic or the Republican parties, as they both uphold the will of the ruling class. We, as the advanced detachment of the working class, take it as our responsibility to build the vessel for representing and achieving the interests of working people in this country. In the 2 years that since the ACP was formed, we have developed chapters across the country. And in these chapters, we've been engaging in a variety of community work. We've been building businesses, holding solidarity demonstrations with imperialized countries. We've been running in local elections and working in labor organizing. We also have a strong international connections through different nations' revolutionary projects that have developed our legitimacy and solidarity. This event is brought to you by the Florida chapter of the ACP. Our work thus far has included collaborating with local mass organizations, supporting farm workers in South Florida, and investigating local labor struggles. So, we're here today to discuss what some call the woman question. How do we as socialists address the ever-present issue of gender? And why do we even need to consider this when developing our party? But before we get started, I want to make it abundantly clear that we are going to be talking about working class women specifically. We are not interested in hashtag equality for Kamala Harris, for Nancy Pelosi, or for any other woman in the ruling class, the financier and imperialist class who benefit from the economic exploitation of working class people. Women who hoard obscene amounts of wealth while millions starve. Women who sit on top of corporate banking and industrial monopolies and leech off of their employees. Women who strategically coordinate and benefit from the rising cost of food, of housing, and healthcare. Women who drop bombs and drone strike other women and children in places across the world that dare to not fall in line with US imperialism. When we talk about women under socialism, our purpose is not to invoke these pink-washed, dehumanizing, disgusting puppets of the bourgeoisie.
I know, that's right.
What we are interested in is the liberation of working class women. Those whose productive labor actually contributes to our society, and whose liberation will only come once we as workers understand that capitalism will never produce the social conditions to solve any identity-based policy oppression. In fact, it is the capitalist and billionaire-backed academia that produces identity-based theories which purposefully slander communism or any mention of class antagonism as the root of these issues. And this just trickles down into gender war, reactionary slop from progressives and conservatives alike, resulting in a population of working people too busy hating each other to see their common interests. So, if we claim to be against the gender divide, you might be wondering, why are we holding this event? Because we want to win. It would be absolutely foolish of us to sit by and let half of the population believe that they have no role in political organizing, that they cannot be in a revolutionary party, that communism or socialist economics doesn't benefit them at all. We will only be successful if we, as the Vanguard Party, are open to all serious communists who are dedicated to the work. Since the dawn of time, all societies have had to reckon with the woman question. And different nations have had developed various divisions of labor and gender roles for their communities. As the US developed under a capitalist economy, the labor of women was minimized and our role in society was devalued. However, in modern times, as women entered the industrial workforce, this has expanded their ability of these women to improve their conditions through manipulating and withholding their labor. This power is only possible through understanding themselves as part of the proletariat and organizing themselves as such. As Marxist-Leninists, our actions and methodologies are guided by a historical materialist understanding of the world. We must thoroughly study what was and wasn't effective for past revolutionary movements, extract those successful principles and tactics, and work to mold them to fit our material conditions. And as a result of those studies, today we'll be discussing how women have struggled uniquely under capitalism, how socialist countries have intentionally strengthened the position of women, and our path ahead as communists working to build a better world for all workers. As the American Communist Party, we have a deep understanding that this is just the beginning. Building the Vanguard Party should not be the end of the road. We must prepare effectively for revolution and the work of rebuilding our country, which will take robust networks of strong and skilled workers. Reconstruction will include teachers who are women and truck drivers who are men, and also nurses who are men and carpenters who are women. Speaking of carpenters, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Zarina, who will be speaking about the modern reality of women under capitalism. Go.
Hi guys, thank you so much. Yes, my name is Zarina. I'm going to be talking about the modern reality of capitalism. We're going to be giving some crits where criticisms are due, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys tonight.
We're excited to be here with you.
OMG, thank you. So, the modern reality of working women in America today is one of systemic overwork, structural devaluation, and impossible choices. It's not one of liberation or progress. Women are paid less for their labor, expected to perform the vast majority of unpaid domestic work, and concentrated in low-wage, insecure jobs. Capitalism depends on our labor, but it would never support us. This is not a matter of personal choice or ambition. This is a matter of the material reality of capitalism's dependency on and exploitation of women. So, what do I mean by that? I'm saying that women do the majority, about 2/3 of the unpaid caregiving in all of the United States. And globally, women and girls shoulder 76% of unpaid care responsibilities. And that's crazy. That amounts to $10 billion annually. Or 10 trillion, forgive me, $10 trillion. That's 10 Elon Musks.
Too many.
One is too many.
Do we have? So in addition to that, the reality of working women is we're being expelled from economic society. Liberal feminists would have women believing we can have it all if we just work hard and break that glass ceiling, but that promise was simply not made for working class and women. That promise was made to the bourgeoisie. The only reality for working class women is empty promises if we just rely on these false safety nets that have been provided, like, what's that CARE Act?
The one that's been
Yes, the Family Act. So you guys might be familiar with the Family Act. It was reintroduced in September of 2025. It promised up to 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. But as of today, it remains just that, a promise, a proposal. The U.S. remains one of the only nations in the entire world with no national paid family and medical leave. And as I stated earlier, those are the women and the little girls of our nation picking that labor up. And we're not getting compensated for that.
Hey, yeah. Also, I guess we didn't really explain. We're going to be having the panel conversationally.
Yeah, we're going to be yapping at you.
Together. Yeah, so I wanted to hit on something that you said a little bit earlier. We're talking about how globally women are responsible for over 70% of unpaid caretaking labor. And something that I really want to emphasize is a lot of times, the left will talk about how, or liberals in particular, will talk about how the way that getting women equal in society is like having them enter the same workforces as men and la-di-da-di-da, but they're not talking about the industries that women actually primarily occupy, like caretaking, like teaching, which are either not paid or significantly underpaid. And so when we talk about these, the reality is that there is a lot of gendered labor, right? We can have like an idealistic conversation about how that shouldn't be the case, but there are fundamentally jobs that are much more occupied by a particular gender. And jobs like caretaking, despite the fact that they're so incredibly important, are not taken seriously. And you kind of see people are always talking about mental health crises and et cetera. But society is decaying in a lot of ways with that lack of emphasis on social safety as it relates to caretaking. And it's particularly because that's seen as a gendered industry that it's not given the emphasis necessary. But child rearing is pretty much one of the most, if not the most important thing that you can do for the future.
We're bringing the working class continually. We keep bringing the working class into the world over and over and over again. And that's just measly women's work, guys. We don't really need to work on getting better healthcare accessible for them. We don't need like prenatals. We don't need them to have access to their doctors for their 11-week checkups, you know.
And there's even the component of the double shift, and I don't know if you're going to get into that a little later.
Oh yeah, we can talk about it.
And we're gonna talk about it more extensively. But during World War II, you see the entrance of women into the labor force, and they're taking on these jobs in industry, but the amount of caretaking that they're doing isn't going down. Men at the same time do not come back from World War II and then start to take on caretaking roles. Now it's just women doing 2 jobs in one day.
Exactly. Yeah, so a little bit about the double shift. So most working women are forced into what we're calling the double shift. It is the material reality of capitalism's dependency on and exploitation of working women. It's not a personal failure. As I wrote up there, between January and August of 2025, about 45,000 women left the U.S. workforce. About 30% of those women left the U.S. workforce to go take care of their children. That's ridiculous. We're being expelled from the working class entirely. We're being rejected. We're being pushed out. Again, to raise the next generation of the working class. And for what? For them to continue to be exploited, for them to continue to be chained down, for them to continue to raise the next generation of the working class and see nothing in return. That's ridiculous. And I really want to emphasize that most women are not choosing to leave the workforce. There's this illusion of choice. You can just go be a girl boss entrepreneur, do it yourself, you know, get a little Etsy shop, do your little OnlyFans, and you're fine, you know, but that's not a choice that you can really make if it's like, do that or live on the streets, do that or die, do that or your child doesn't have baby formula, do that or like your sick grandma is dead, you know, like these are horrific consequences. That's not a choice. I would, you know.
It's not an accurate reflection of reality, yeah. Right? And this is particularly emphasized within the emphasis on sex work for young women, right? Like we see the campaigns of like sex work is work, or like if you're having trouble getting a job, then just like get your bag, whether it is, you know, historically through things like brothels, and then those continue through OnlyFans, which is basically like a pimp corporation, a pimp conglomerate. I don't know if you want to add on to that a little bit, but you know, as we see these things develop, like women are pushed towards these industries, but we have to ask who is benefiting from that and who is buying that. And how does that economy actually run? Who's primarily contributing to that economy? And we see things like P. Diddy or Jeffrey Epstein, right? And people try to make a separation between those two things. But the fact that the people that own OnlyFans and they own these like multimedia companies are the ones that are creating this social media propaganda and funding these influencers to encourage this sort of work. And then the people that end up in this work are generally young working class girls that have been told either this is what they need to do because they just it's empowering, right? They either don't have money for it or there's like a social contract involved in it, and it's all at the end of the day not just being encouraged by ruling class men, but also the women that see economic benefit from, you know, representing like the top 1% of OnlyFans content creators. And you have these women that are getting heavily involved in these industries that are directly related to human trafficking, and that's considered empowering or liberation. That's the state of women under capitalism.
Another thing of human trafficking, like when these women are having children, a lot of the time they're going to orphanages, and these orphanages, who are they also owned by? Where is the money going? We'll see Erica Kirk in Romania, who had, I forgot what it was called, not the Blue Angels, but something similar, and it was stationed next to a American base, and they were known for rampant sex trafficking for these little children in orphanages. Like, it's the same. They're going to profit off of women and children as a punishment.
I think while we yap about this, we can move on to the next slide. But, yeah. So, Georgie, you mentioned a slogan earlier that I'm very glad you brought up. The slogan, sex work is work. What does that mean? I don't care. I'll tell you. What does it do? It obscures the fact that under capitalism, all work is alienated and exploitative, and the sex trade industry imposes this alienation on the human body in its most intimate sphere. Our working class daughters should not be told that sex work is empowering. That shouldn't be an empowering slogan to raise your daughter on. I believe that our sons and our daughters deserve better than empty promises and slogans like that. And I really want to emphasize something. The sex trade industry is the enemy of the working class. And I want to be clear that I'm not talking about the countless women and the countless children that are victims of this industry. I am talking about the industry. And it's the enemy not only because it exploits women and children, but because it systematically severs the most vulnerable members of our society from collective struggle. Any genuine working class liberation movement must confront and oppose this exploitation, and not out of a moral superiority, but because the very existence of the sex trade industry is a mortal blow to the working class solidarity.
And I think we also might be getting a little ahead of ourselves here. Like, when we talk about the sex industry, what does it actually look like, right? It's like people who allegedly have chosen to be in the sex industry, but you can look at 70% of people that sell their bodies, and those people are actually trafficked as children first. And so when we talk about people making that choice, the actual statistics, like for instance, over 90% of women that are involved in pornography saying that if they had another lucrative job, they would 100% go to that. That is what the industry actually looks like. These statistics are not of women that want to be in it. And even if there are women that believe that they are making this choice consensually, the fact that they are propped up over the global South women that are trafficked through this industry is absolutely abhorrent and horrendous. The sex industry, a lot of times people will call it like the oldest profession in the world, which is not true, and it's coined by a white supremacist named Rudyard Kipling, who also wrote The White Man's Burden. But at the same time, even if that was the case, even if it was the oldest profession in the world, it is directly tied to the legacy of sex slavery. The body being owned, and particularly the body of women and children being owned by the ruling class, is not something that we should encourage. It's something that is a demonstrable stain on human history and continues to be a demonstrable stain on American society, which is one of the top 5 human trafficking destinations in the entire world.
And I want to say, the women who may or may not be choosing to do this, it's, for me, like, it's a matter of propping themselves up in a better place under capitalism. They feel under capitalism somehow they're better now. And I don't care what my position is under capitalism, because I know that we're going to tear that down. The goal is not to be in a better position under capitalism. The goal is to knock it down. The goal is to start anew. The goal, is we want a true democracy. We want liberation for the working class. That's going to include our women. That's going to include our children. That's going to include the future generations, it's not about, again, if you choose that, if you want to make that choice, nobody's going to stop you. But nobody here, a real communist, would never want to prop themselves up in a better position under capitalism. Who cares where you're at under capitalism? Organize. Sorry, guys. Actually, I got caught up in the moment. I want to talk about the lumpen proletariat really quickly. I got 10 minutes. Perfect. So, the concept of the lumpen proletariat, I really feel, is essential for understanding how capitalism regulates certain groups to the margins of society, and how the separation is weaponized to undermine class solidarity. So, while the proletariat is defined by its relationship to production, the lumpen proletariat exists more on the fringe of that system. And that's not an accident. Marx described the lumpen proletariat as the refuse of all classes, and the sex trade systematically produces this refuse. It takes women from the working class, and it pushes them into a category that exists outside of it. And the lumpen proletariat is not a natural category. It's a product of capitalism. So when women are pushed into the sex trade, they're really not choosing to leave the working class. They're being expelled from it. And I just want to emphasize, to successfully combat capitalism, the real goal is to reintegrate as many lumpen proletariat who come to us as we can access, we want to reintegrate them into the productive forces. And again, this is not like an act of charity. This is not an act of moral superiority. It is a strategic necessity.
And Mao talks about it as well when Mao goes through his definitions of the classes. He talks about how because the lumpen proletariat, or rather, when we say lumpen proletariat, I want to define that a little bit. It's people who exist outside of the working class, like you were saying, because they're not involved in productive labor. So that's going to be people that are drug traffickers. It's going to be people that are generally unemployed. That's going to be people that are sex workers, right? It's going to be homeless people, but people that are unemployed, right? It's just people that are generally not producing. And these people are able to be taken advantage of in revolutionary scenarios by the ruling class because they can offer them money, they can offer them property, right? And so when we as the working class are in a moment of revolutionary struggle to understand this class and to have the knowledge of this class, Mao talks about how that's actually extremely necessary because this is such a huge segment of the working class and of not of the working class, but outside of the working class, and they can threaten those revolutionary moments, then exactly like you said, it's a strategic necessity to try and understand and reach out to them and pull them into productive labor so we can get their numbers on our side, because they're not at all an insignificant portion of the population.
Exactly. Yes, exactly what Georgie was saying. They're not an insignificant portion, and obviously the goal is not to organize everybody and then we've made world peace. You know, it's going to be an ongoing struggle, but we have to oppose exploitation at all ends. We have to oppose liberalism at every corner. We have to oppose capitalism. It permeates through every facet of our life. It's everywhere, guys, and you have to be looking for it. Okay.
One more thing for the sex work industry or sex trade industry. Why would sex work be considered liberating if a woman is going to be working to sexually fulfill a man? How is that going to be liberating in any form?
And it's also just there's no such thing as consensual work under capitalism, right? If something would not exist without without trade, without money, right? Then how can that be ever considered something that's consensual? If consent is behind $1, then that's coercion.
Exactly, and the limits, what we call legal here, maybe it's 18 here. In Japan, it was just 13 years old, and they just changed it to 16 years old just a couple of years ago, and no one's really talking about that. But because it's legal, it's all right.
Exactly. It's a lot of people are considering the legality, and not just that, but we can even mention the fact that when a prostitute gets raped, she can't go to the police about it, because if she does go to the police about it, they'll arrest her. And that's not even to get into the fact that women are much more likely to experience sexual violence by those that are arresting them.
And to touch a little bit more on violence that women face, kind of more worldwide, I'm going to talk about something that I've been calling the girl bossification of feminism. So I wrote, feminism is being used as a geopolitical tool where those in power cite their acceptance of women to legitimate imperialist projects as empowerment. For example, here we have a screenshot from the Lockheed Martin website. This is for the Women's History Month. They have another one. It highlights the women of Lockheed Martin. And I didn't really scroll because I don't care about these women who are building bombs that are being dropped in Gaza. I don't care about the women who are designing these drones that are striking down apartments. That is none of my concern. When I'm thinking about the women of Lockheed Martin, I'm thinking about how many women have been slaughtered by these weapons at my tax dollar expense, no less. But because they're wrapping it up in pro-woman language, this is empowering and this is progressive. This is ridiculous. And another example that comes to mind is Israel. And they'll often cite their women-friendly culture as justification for the brutal genocide of Palestinians. And we all know that they're murdering innocent women, they're murdering innocent children, they're murdering innocent men. They don't care who the bombs are falling on, just as long as they're innocent,
I was just going to say, and sexual warfare is a huge component of that as well. And not just against women prisoners, but as well as Palestinian male political prisoners. And you can see this development basically coming, maybe this is too deep, but you can see this development basically coming directly from like Greco-Roman society, and then the kind of like degendering that colonized men and imperialized men experience, where basically you see women in sex slavery and children in sex slavery, and so then these men at the same time are degendered by these people that are coming in, and they're sexually humiliated because they want to make them feel unmanly. And that's just another way that this sort of creation of this gendered divisions of sexual violence also, you know, harms men as well, not just women.
It's true. Yeah, a lot of what we're talking about really, I do talk about the shared reality, but we're still on the girl bossification of imperialism right now. So Israel, as women-friendly as it is, you know, it's strategically deploying these feminist and these pink-washing tactics in order to, they're utilizing them to present themselves as progressive. While 38,000 women and girls have been murdered in Israel since 2023.
And that's an underestimate. That's an
underestimate, yeah.
Underestimate.
It is so sad to think about.
This is like how much the medical centers in Gaza have been able to count since their medical tracking was destroyed at the end of 2023. So this is like, it's literally the only official estimate that we can have, and it's probably completely inaccurate.
But don't worry, guys. Israel is super progressive, I swear. So yeah, that's just a lot of this is to say that capitalism is really packing this up and marketing a lot of this as progressive, but I don't really see any progressions being made. You know, we're still murdering civilians worldwide. We still have women and children on our streets starving to death. You know, we have women and children prostituting themselves. This is a horrible reality, but it is the material reality, and we can't deny it. And we were talking a little bit about the shared reality, and so we talked a lot about how like capitalism's co-optation and the girl bossification of imperialism all serve to obscure the one fundamental truth that capitalism exploits the whole working class, men and women alike. So the system that forces women into the double shift and devalues reproductive labor and celebrates a few exceptional women at the top, it is the same system that traps men in precarious low-wage work and destroys their community and denies them the time and energy to be present fathers and partners. We spend a lot of time in this identity politics game, you know, blaming each other, and that has only harmed us, that has only caused us damage, and we just want to make it so clear that at the end of the day, the enemy is capitalism, the enemy is imperialism, the enemy is not your coworker who maybe you think is backwards, but you know, his wife is at home, she's making dinner, she's taking care of the sick father-in-law, she's got 2 toddlers running around, like, he's got a hard life. Does he really have time to like update himself on everything right now? And you know, like the lunch lady at school, she might be kind of mean sometimes, but again, she's probably doing all of the household labor when she gets home, and we can't keep blaming each other. Again, I said somewhere, the only way to successfully combat capitalism is to unite as workers. It's to unite as the working class. That's what we all are. That's what unites us. And that is about, oh, just kidding, guys. I actually have 2 quotes that I wanted to share with you. So I had a quote by, I'm going to do Engels. Engels from The Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State. I just really feel like this sums up the whole of what my section was trying to get across. So the emancipation of women will only be possible when women can take part in production on a large social scale, and domestic labor work no longer claims anything but an insignificant amount of her time. And I did compile a little reading list and some quotes, and if anybody has any questions, we're going to have plenty of time for discussion, and I look forward to speaking with you all. Thank you so much.
All All right, thank you, everyone. I wanted to update y'all again on the format, so we'll be having a short Q&A if anyone has discussions per section. After each speaker, we'll have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then after everyone is done, we'll have an open Q&A discussion. That'll be a lot longer of a time limit for that. So if anyone has any specific questions on Zarina's topics, let us know. I can pass the mic around or anything. Let me know. Nope.
Any
Very
criticisms? You're like, I didn't like this. That didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I have a question about robotification section.
Sorry. That's my bad. That's totally my bad. You can say it and then I'll repeat it for the recording. That's fine.
So I have a question about the girl bossification section. So like in relation to pinkwashing with feminism and imperialism, what do you think about the way people go about Iran and their...
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, and their like culture and religion and how a lot of third world countries are backwards, and that's an excuse to decimate them.
Yeah, so the question was on the topic of pinkwashing. What was our perspective on Iran and countries of similar areas or cultures that have certain religious or cultural practices that might go against what some people think is for women's liberation? Is that a good summary?
I'll say what I said again about the women dropping bombs and like I don't care about them. What I care about is the people being slaughtered. And in regards to Iran, their fight is theirs to fight. And it's not mine to criticize. But I'm going to stand against imperialism at every corner. So I think Georgie does have an answer, though.
Iran's fight might not be yours to criticize, but it is mine to glaze. So I feel like a lot of times when we exist under the understanding of Western feminism, we kind of have a skewed idea of what exactly that means. First of all, it would be really, really difficult to go fully, and that is literally its own EduForum, which we've done as different organizations. But something that I want to say is the idea that women in Iran are completely disempowered. There is literally in Iran, they literally have a women's federation that the government is beholden to answer to democratic votes, right? So you can think about the petition that wanted hijab to no longer be mandatory that 1 million women signed. 5 million women who were part of this organization ended up coming back and saying, no, we want it to be mandatory. Hijab, by the way, despite being legally mandatory since basically about 2023, this has not been actually... This is actually enforced. This has actually not been significantly enforced. You can see multiple videos of Iranian crowds, for instance, even of women that are mourning Ayatollah Khamenei the martyr. You can see multiple videos of women that are not in mandatory hijab that are existing around government officials, that are existing around the police force, and they're being completely left alone. And so I think, under Western feminism, we have this idea that women's bodies are accessible and that they need to be shown off, and therefore we look at these cultures that are more sexually and socially conservative or conservative in their clothing. And, we believe that constitutes a mechanism of oppression. And to me, it's I actually don't find anything liberating about the fact that women are constantly told that they must show off their bodies, right? That's what they're good for. And I think the way that people look at things like hijab and things like niqab, which by the way are legally banned in France, and that's something we should actually be talking about. That's controlling women's clothing and that's controlling women's autonomy. I don't even know exactly how to answer this question because I love Iran down. It's just to me it's extremely abhorrent that you honestly see a lot of varying perspectives among women in Iran who are talking about how it makes them feel protected. Because people are mostly focusing on the hijab thing, let's be honest, because what do they actually know about the fact that in Iran, 60% of the STEM studiers are women? What do they actually know about the elimination of leper colonies? They actually don't know about the internal politics of Iran. They're incredibly focused on after we bombed Iran, people were tweeting, does this mean we get Persian porn now? That's what people are focused on.
That's exactly what I was going to say, actually. The liberals are foaming at the mouth, waiting for Iranians to have their country not be a sovereign nation anymore or be taken over by an American coup, and then have Iranian OnlyFans. It's very dystopian on what.
Like, I'm just mad now.
This is our women's liberation, being a part of OnlyFans.
But thank you so much for asking a question. Sorry, could I get your name? Yeah, I'm Caleb. Thank you. So nice to meet you, Caleb.
All right, any last question before we continue? Nope. All right, so our next speaker is Sasha, who will be speaking about the history of women under socialism.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sasha Kotov. I will be discussing the improvements women have experienced under socialism in the USSR, Cuba, and China. We will be going over how the US has created a narrative. Oh, if we can get the slide. We will be going over how the US has created a narrative insisting that women's liberation must look a specific way and encapsulate Western ideals to be considered progressive. Western ideals that are responsible to now rampant sex trafficking, poor education in the West, poor healthcare, and a cancer that has taken over the women's liberation movement, which we have seen through many women exerting their efforts and attention towards secondary contradictions instead of primary. As Comrade Zarina stated, we can see how the United States and other Western capitalist countries place almost no real limits when it comes to the ability to turn people into commodities for profit, and how that contributes for sex trafficking. This directly relates into why women's economic independence necessitates a communist system. And if I can get the next slide. US propaganda versus Eastern communist countries. As we can see here, there is a stark contrast to the narratives that have been pushed onto both men and women to consume under both modes of production. The American propaganda posters seen on the right are after the return of soldiers from World War II. Many people look to the iconic Let's Do It poster, where a woman is rolling up her sleeves and showcasing her bicep in attire that is fitting for blue-collar occupations. But where did that female empowerment go when the men returned home? Capitalism only began to respect women as a labor force due to needing the country to continue to run as millions of men left home. Though there is nothing wrong with that, what is condemnable is the fact that American capitalists were frightened of the liberating privileges that women then had access to, resulting in them harshly and swiftly combating this quick, progressive movement by suppressing women psychologically. And who better for the capitalists to do their bidding of suppression? The men of the household, police, and of course the state. Just as W.E.B. Du Bois described the capitalists to influence low-income white people to garner hatred for their black counterpart as a way for them to kill off real united movements in the past. The narratives we can see here are correlating stay-at-home wives and mothers to servitude and sex objects, feeding the men a psychological power above his spouse or women in general. This influx of power stripped the woman of both social encouragement and agency. Contrast these images and propaganda pieces to those from Eastern communist countries, where we can see the state push for art, influencing women to take part in politics, learn how to defend with a gun, join fields in STEM, as well as stand for political movements, something we can see reflect past forms of art and into reality. If we can get the next slide. The Soviet Union. Since the overthrow of the Russian monarchy in 1917, we can see how quickly the reality changed for the everyday woman and, of course, citizen under the Soviet Union. Despite how the United States has portrayed the Soviet Union as cold-hearted red fascists, the facts are that the government prioritized the lives of every citizen, unlike actual fascists who prioritized the lives of the few. Prior to the revolution, it was noted that about 13% of women were considered literate, life expectancy of 30s to low 40s, and kept most workers in feudal conditions, living as serfs and peasants at the hands of their lords. The growing need to overturn the expiring feudal state that Russia kept their citizens in became dire and was executed for nearly 12 years from the first revolution in 1905 to the second and third in the year 1917. Although women have taken part in all three revolutions in different capacities, I want to bring attention to the successful revolution that took place on International Women's Day on February 23rd, 1917. It is stated that thousands of housewives and factory-working women became enraged with the bread shortages and surged into the streets to protest, igniting over 200,000 workers the following day in Petrograd to join in this frustration against the Tsar and his ruling. Thanks to the Bolshevik Party, the Tsar had been abdicated shortly after on March 3rd, 1917.
And I want to hop in on that as well. It's not just the Russian Revolution. We can see the same thing happen with the French Revolution. We can see that a very similar thing happened in Algiers. And there is I feel like a lot of times there's this idea that like because women don't occupy quote unquote like important jobs, or they don't occupy blue collar jobs, and blue collar jobs are majority made up of men, that women are somehow insignificant in a revolutionary moment. When the reality is that like the psychological impact of like let's be for real, the psychological impact of like a bunch of housewives on the street being like, we're fed up, we are done with this, is extremely, extremely significant. And you can see how it creates a galvanization of the rest of society to understand that they need to go forward, that something needs to change. It did not only happen in Russia. Like I said, it's also happened in France and Algiers, and I'm sure multiple other places. There's been multiple revolutionary struggles undertaken by women in America as well. So the idea that there's not like a specific role that women have played historically is just a little ludicrous.
100%. And fast forward to the 1960s and 1970s, we can see Soviet women represent over 33% of the Supreme Soviet, which was the highest governing body of the Soviet Union. Maintain a representation at an average of 40% in fields of STEM or higher, have a state-sponsored organization called the Committee of Soviet Women, which notably promoted and encouraged social norms through strategic modeling, which can be seen in their magazine called Soviet Woman. Although I would love to continue speaking about the success achieved under the Soviet Union, I must inform those who aren't aware that there was a illegal dissolution in 1991. This resulted in poverty skyrocketing to 50% of the population, the sex trade soaring both with women and children, hospitals and schools crumbling, life expectancies dropped from 70-year-old averages to 58 years, and substance abuse sweeping the countries. In the year 1997 alone, 175,000 women from prior Soviet Union countries were reported to be sold into sex markets due to organized crime and poverty, as the countries now had little to no government protections, resulting in the depiction of Russian and ex-Soviet women to be portrayed as prostitutes or mail-order brides in the media by the U.S.
Yeah, sorry, I had a note on that. I don't know where my note went. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we see this bimbification of like Slavic women ever since the collapse of the USSR, where it's always, again, like a woman whose body is meant to be accessed, whose only relevance to existence is the fact that she's like hanging off of a man's arm. And like we see it all across like the manosphere, that portrayal of Slavic women. You see memes about it online. You see it all over movies, and that had never been the reality for Slavic and Eastern European women before the illegal dissolution of the USSR. Every single time capitalism gets its hands into something that is actually advocating for the protection of not just women's bodies, but people's bodies in general, you see the ruling class take extreme offense to the fact that there's something that could be off limits.
Can I get to the next slide, please? All right, Cuba.
Viva Cuba!
Oftentimes, when people are discussing communist countries, they have a preconceived notion of what they look like culturally. The best example of a communist country that could be considered more relatable, especially to us here in Florida, would be Cuba.
Viva!
Only 90 miles away. Yes. Only 90 miles away from Key West, this communist country is in our backyard. We can see similarities when it comes to architecture, shared vintage cars, food, nature, and of course, much more socially. Through the Communist Party of Cuba, which took over officially in 1965, the Federation of Cuban Women was officially recognized and was considered to be the right arm of the revolution. A few of their efforts include the 1961 emblematic literacy campaign, where thousands of young women would go to remote areas to teach reading and writing, which helped decrease the illiteracy rates from 60% as prior to the revolution to illiteracy rates of 28 to 30%, only within a few years. Cuba's illiteracy rate today is at 0.2%. Beyond this feat, the Federation of Cuban Women notably began and has continued to run a program called the Network of Women and Family Guidance Centers that offer legal, psychological, and social counseling for those who have endured gender-based violence. Outside of the triumphs, did you want to speak?
I was gonna hop in for a second. Education is so necessary to socialism. Again, industry that has primarily been occupied by women throughout history. And obviously the reason why they don't want the working class to be educated, the ruling class does not want the working class to be educated, is because they'll begin to understand these mechanisms of liberation. And we can look directly at our own history at the period of Reconstruction in the American South, where you see the attacking of teachers, of schools, this mass destruction of education. And again, that is a fight that women were leading, an industry that women were leading.
Yes. And beyond this feat, the Federation of Cuban Women notably began and has wait a second, did I read this already? Yes, I did. Outside of the triumphs listed by the right arm of the revolution, we can also see the communist government enact equal pay into law 4 years before the U.S., as well as equal rights in marriage family code in the year 1975, guaranteeing spouses full equal responsibilities for the home and children. This Family Code Act is not something that has even been placed in the U.S. to this day, as Zarina stated.
We're never getting that, not under capitalism.
Although Cuba is currently still a sovereign nation, we may notice people point out the contradiction when discussing statistics not being linear in progress, especially when it pertains to the welfare and quality of life. Just as the U.S. played a role in the fall of the Soviet Union through psychological warfare and organized deals with the greedy politicians, the U.S. took a similar route by violently threatening and restricting nearly all trade, financial transactions, and travel under the U.S. embargo policy enacted in 1962. This was then strengthened by the sanction called Helms-Burton Act, which allowed U.S. citizens to sue foreign companies that used property confiscated by Cuba starting in the year 1996. And most recently, the oil embargo from 2026, where the U.S. has targeted the country's oil imports by authorizing tariffs on countries that send oil over to Cuba. This sanction is the cause of the country's lack in fuel supply, which has resulted in prolonged blackouts, disrupting households, hospital operations, water pumping, and food refrigeration. This increased mortality rates are due to all the sanctions the U.S. has imposed on the communist country, not inherently because the country is communist.
And I want to get in there as well. These rolling blackouts that shut down hospitals are leading to a significant increase in infant mortality rates. And a lot of times you have American feminists that want to talk about reproductive rights, but reproductive rights also look like the right to have healthy children, the right to have a child. And this is a right that is consistently taken away from women that are being victimized by imperialism in the global South.
If I can get to the next slide. And China, the current most successful communist country in the world. They have become exemplary in showing the people across the globe how a government should correctly take care of its citizens. Although China's population is nearly 4 times the size of ours in the US, through the communist movement, over time, China has been able to lift over 850 million people out of poverty, and even declared that extreme poverty has been eliminated in the recent year of 2021. Yeah. All of this taking place right after living in a feudal state until the year, 20 years before their revolution in 1949. These priorities continue to show in their public's education and healthcare systems. A country that began with an estimated 2 to 10% literacy rate for women prior to the communist revolution. Education was prioritized and pushed throughout the country since the first year of revolution in 1949. They enacted the Common Program, which legally mandated equal rights for women in education, held 3 major campaigns which attributed to dropping the illiteracy rate to 33% by the year 1964, as well as had practical teaching methods that would accommodate women by offering childcare or assisting in household duties to provide the women time for the evening classes. America would never do that. To jump to the current day, however, Chinese women account for over 46% of all fields regarding science and technology, and make up a total of 50.01% of postgraduates. These statistics aren't usually shared by the American stereotype of Chinese women that are regularly overtly sexualized in the past Hollywood media, as they have been pictured as solely concubines or sweatshop workers. In fact, only a year after the revolution did China enact the 1950 marriage law, which prohibited polyamory, concubinage, and child betrothal. Although the criminalization of concubines did not happen overnight, the consideration for those women were also put in place by letting the women choose to either stay a part of the household, return to their families, or receive government support to start their own lives independently. If these few statistics listed do not show the care that the Chinese government had for liberating women, then perhaps understanding that it is because of the efforts such as the Women's Special Task Company, also known as the Red Detachment of Women, from the years 1931 to 1932. This formal unit started with over 100 female leading personnel and ended with over 10,000 women across many bases. It is due to revolutionary contributions by these communist women that China is able to achieve the accomplishments they have had to this day. The strides for women under these socialist states should serve as inspiration for what we can achieve here in the US.
Thank you, Sasha. All right, so does anyone else have any questions based on Sasha's presentation? Any clarifications or anything they'd want to add of note? Yes.
Do you guys have any input on women in the Philippines?
The question is, do the speakers have any input on women in the Philippines?
Yes. Mostly my understanding, are you Filipina? Yeah. Mostly my understanding of the way that I can really talk about capitalism and the way that it's horrifically affected Filipino women. We see that it's one of the greatest destinations for the sex trade and for sex tourism. The way in which particularly women within Southeast Asia are treated again as objects of consumption for men, not just in the Philippines. You can also see that this happened in Korea, Thailand, Vietnam. Vietnam has been able to take strides forward, being a socialist country, to protect their women. But a lot of times, we continue seeing this this complete dehumanization through capitalism, through imperialism. A lot of what we talked about earlier, really, with men believing that, especially ruling class white men from the imperial core, believing that they should have this access to women in these imperialized nations.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in regards to the sex tourism, on a project we did a few years ago, right? Yeah. Is when I really kind of studied sex tourism as a thing. That was I'd never heard that word before. What is that? But I mean, context clues in the name. Maybe I don't have to explain it. So yeah, I would say again, it's these are outputs, or these are products of capitalism and imperialism that have been placed on these women. And like I said, the sex trade industry as a whole, which this is a part of, which is sex tourism is a part of, sex trafficking is a part of, it severs the most vulnerable women of our society. It tries to keep them away from working class solidarity. It tries to isolate them, so that way we can continue to utilize them in this way and dehumanize them in this way.
And I know in Nicaragua, and I don't know, Itza, if you want to talk about it a little bit, because you probably know the statistics a little bit better than I do. But yeah, in another recent project we did, when it comes to countries in the global south, combating the sex industry and making pimping illegal, you pretty much immediately see an increase in quality of life for women.
Can I add on?
Yeah, definitely.
During the time of, I think it was the Golden Era.
I think it'll reach you.
During the time of, I believe it was the golden era. It wasn't during Marcos's era, but it was before that. Women were treated like better, and they were told that, not told, but the medical field. They were put more into the medical field. And my Lola, she was in a tribe, and she became a doctor in Manila so she could go back to her people and help her people. And then during Marcos's era, he would actually kill anyone that said they were like close to communist, and it was like really bad. That's what's happening right now. His son is in office, and my Tito is a neurologist in the Philippines, and one of his coworkers is female, and she said she doesn't like what's going on, and she is under arrest right now. So yeah.
Completely backed and supported by the U.S. as well.
You have a question or something to add? I'm gonna see if this doesn't.
No, I think we're good here. Yeah. No, I've seen it. Example, I'm Cuban American. I was born here, but I got family in Cuba. I'm constantly down there. I've been to other parts of Latin America, so I always use it as like my little like metric system. But like example, I've gone to Mexico. I've gone to the Dominican Republic. Like el machismo, which is very dominant in Latin America. It's much more dominant in those areas than when I see it in Cuba. Like in Cuba, you can't tell your girlfriend she can't work, she can't work, she can't wear this, she can't wear that. Like a Cuban woman won't let that fly. Like that type of like, oh, I can't wear this, I can't go there. Like that just doesn't. It's not gonna fly. So you see that women are much more liberated socially. It's much more common for them to the women have the liberty of also there's less crime. They can go out at 3-4 a.m. Nothing is gonna happen to them. They're much more safer. And yeah, like the men just respect their women much more, rather than like when you think of like machismo in like Mexico or something like that, which is you have femicide and all these issues which are less common in Cuba. And I do think it's because of socialism. It's because of having it's because of Marxist-Leninism. It's because of having a communist party in charge that enforces Marxism-Leninism that women are more safe.
I wanted to add to that actually really quickly. There was a comrade that recently identified that distinction. So the Federation of Cuban Women was a group that existed before revolution, but they were entrenched and made part of the Revolutionary Party after revolution. And I think that's something that's really important to highlight. So like there were issues that women were facing before the revolution, of course. They were existing under a very oppressive system, but the social issues were able to be addressed after revolution. There's really not an effective way to address gender issues or social issues, things like that, while you're also being oppressed and exploited economically. So they, as an effective way to address that within like individual Latino culture is of course rampant with machismo, but once you're able to systemically tackle and avoid the systemic exploitation that these women are facing, then you can do the easy work where it's just understanding people's social interactions and just cultural ways of interacting with each other, bringing them together in different ways that they maybe weren't brought together previously because of that division of labor, and let it be something a bit more like organic and effectively developed. The discrimination or like maybe like behavioral oppression that women were facing after revolution, that could be handled a lot easier once the systemic oppression was taken away. Anything to add? You want to add to that? Okay, any other questions? Any other thoughts? Yeah, this one I don't know if it'll reach you.
Do you guys have anything to say about East Europe? Because I think one of you mentioned, maybe both of you mentioned that sex trafficking kind of flowed over the border after the fall of communism. And I feel like East Europe goes overlooked a lot of the times. These weren't perfect socialist experiments. They kind of fell under the Soviet sphere of influence during the Warsaw Pact after World War II. But at the same time, I think one of the best ways of analyzing what they had under socialism versus what they have now is looking at the women's question, because women had access to daycare, access to healthcare, literacy programs, education, all these things. Versus after the return of capitalism, we've seen the flooding in of basically sex trafficking. You mentioned Erica Kirk's Romanian Angels, which was right next to a NATO base, which is the other thing that came to East Europe, was essentially U.S. occupation. And now with like Epstein and Diddy and all this stuff, everybody's kind of realizing how involved the ruling class is in sex trafficking. But they're not necessarily making that connection between capitalism and sex trafficking. Like, it was the fall of socialism in East Europe that allowed these brothels and stuff to come about. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
Great question. Great question, yeah. I mean, even now, a lot of the prepackaged pro-feminist movement or prepackaged progressive movement of pro-Ukraine, right now, where are the liberals caring about the Ukrainian women who are being prostituted and sent to Israel and has been acknowledged by Israeli politicians? That has been acknowledged for decades, and it's only going on, and it has become much more rampant. Do you have anything else to add?
I guess just with regards to Eastern Europe outside of the Soviet Union, we also see West Germany versus East Germany, and there's just I don't have the statistics on hand because it wasn't really something that we prepped for, but there was such a significant difference. The propaganda campaigns, you had newspaper ads that were running pro-woman advertisements in Eastern Germany, and then you see obviously the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, and then there's just this immediate return to basically, and people hate when you say this, basically Naziite policy, because the amount of laws that were still in place from Nazi Germany in the FRG, otherwise known as West Germany, was significant, especially with regards with what we could consider super exploited or marginalized groups.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that it is incredibly the fall of the USSR and what became of those countries afterwards is incredibly, perhaps reflective is the word, of the state that we're in today as well. I think Sasha said something there was the rapid rate of children and women prostituting themselves on the street. There was economic collapse. There was rampant drug use and drug abuse. And that is literally, you just step outside and that is the state of America that we're living in. And we're supposed to be the most progressive country in the world.
Not to even mention the children that are kidnapped following the collapse of the USSR. And it's not just the USSR. You see children who are kidnapped and they're put either in the adoption industry or they're labor exploited or they're sexually exploited. The USSR, Vietnam, China, imperialist countries have tried to do it to every single communist country, steal their children. Again, when we're talking about things like reproductive rights, to me, it doesn't really seem like reproductive sovereignty when you're literally stealing a baby out of its mother's arms and promising that it's going to be back in 2 weeks.
Okay, actually, I'm not going to expand on that. I forgot what I was going to say.
All right, thank you everyone for that discussion. Our last speaker of the night is going to be Georgie, Big Georgie. And Georgie will be discussing the modern solution of socialism.
Hey guys, how's it going? I am Georgina, a proud member of the American Communist Party, and today I am going to be going over women's relationship to the Vanguard Party. We had Sasha and Zarina very poignantly lay out, don't look at the slides, they're not good. We had Sasha and Zarina very poignantly lay out the role that women have occupied under capitalism and still do versus the role that women have historically occupied under socialism and still do. I am going to be talking about us as 21st century Americans. What does the solution to this question look like? Or rather, how can women relate to the solution? Because I don't want to talk about an ideal society. I don't want to talk to you about how I think women could, in a perfect world where everything is 50-50 equal and no one cares about gender anymore and there's no such thing as gender disrespect. I don't want to come to you guys with that sort of analysis because, to be quite honest, I find it very unhelpful. I want to talk about not this perfect socialist utopia. I want to talk about how can we actually talk to women and organize women to get to this better world, right? So first we have to start with I have that. I have like a caveat here, right? Under capitalism, there simply are gender distinctions. There simply is gendered labor. We might not agree with that. We might not like that. We might not think that women's role should necessarily be relegated to homemaking, right? But that is historically what it has been a lot of the time. So when we're talking about how to talk to women, we have to actually acknowledge this material reality, right? Women simply do have different ways that we socialize and different ways that we are engaged. We don't, the same speaker who resonates extremely well with a male dominant crowd is not always going to be the same speaker that resonates well with a female dominant crowd. There are simply cultural considerations that are more acclimated towards a certain gender, and that is okay. It's just something that needs to be acknowledged in order to actually answer this question, right? So something that I want to say is when it comes to organizing women, we don't need to organize women just as though they're men. Realistically, we should acknowledge where these people are coming from. Caretaking, if it's such an important industry for women, American women in the 21st century, we need to understand how in a lot of ways caretaking can be just as important as militancy. I think there's an emphasis on blue-collar jobs and an emphasis on militancy, and I think that those things are very important because they're very important to the socialist movement. But things that are also important are raising the next generation of workers, something that women have historically been doing forever, something that we really went over in Zarina's section. And so if this is of such importance to society at large, then it must be of importance to the communist movement. And to say that women are... the only way that women could be important is if they were to like occupy like trucker industries is to me extremely unrealistic, because not only do you need to create a revolution and support a revolution, you then need to create and support a society that comes after it. And you simply are not going to find that if you're discounting such a large part of the population. A lot of times, communists are asked, why would we even want to answer the women's question? Because this is something that distracts from the class issue. And to that, I would just say very simply, as Sasha went over, the women's question is historically instantiated by every other communist country. In my opinion, it's anti-communist to ignore the women's question, because it has literally been the question of the USSR and Cuba and Vietnam and China. Like, this is never something that has been ignored. It's something that has to be answered to. It's also untrue that women did not have important roles in these revolutions, because like Sasha said, the propagandistic element of women is what kick-started major components of the Russian Revolution. And there is a distinct difference to me between the liberal weaponization of identity politics and the women's question. To acknowledge that women and men have differences is actually not liberalism, in my opinion, because how we are approaching it is dialectics and materialism, right? It is how to reconcile an actually existing issue that we all see, otherwise known as a contradiction, not exacerbate it. Liberal tendencies are focused on making men and women out to be enemies. They're focused on exacerbating this gender divide. Simultaneously, while focusing on exacerbating the gender divide, they tell us the only way that we can liberate women is through engaging in these male-dominated workforces or these horrific, evil imperialist roles, right? I really get so ahead of myself. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add another thing about the goal is not to organize women as men, is when we're thinking about a lot of these blue-collar jobs and these blue-collar spaces that we want to be a part of and to occupy, those jobs take training. I've been a carpenter's apprentice for 2 years, guys. There are people who are caretaking right now, for free, mind you, and they're really good at it. Should it be our goal to uproot them from what is comfortable, or should it be our goal to meet them and lift them up in those positions so that way they're taken care of,
That's exactly it. Yeah, I was going to get into, and something that I think I mentioned in the trailer for this EduForum, and I think I mentioned it earlier as well. We've rehearsed this 5 times, so at this point what we've actually gone over here tonight is, I have no idea. But have gotten into the fact that like these very significant parts of society that are women focused, that are generally women laborers, are just not receiving the acknowledgement and respect that is necessary. The support that is necessary. But I wanted to get a little bit into, more of the liberal weaponization of this. The reason why women and men are even separated among labor to begin with, and Michael Prenti describes it as a super exploited class, something that is able to, Du Bois talks about it in Black Reconstruction as well, which we've been referencing throughout this. You see that there is a part of the working class that is devalued in comparison to the other part of the working class, so that the part of the working class that is not devalued can then look at this other segment and say, well, at least I'm not like them, right? And that is pretty much exactly what has happened with this woman versus man divide. But not only that, we see this actively exacerbated by so-called progressives that are trying to convince women that men are the enemy, when that is not reality. Obviously, this is an EduForum about women, for women, primarily in regards to the history and culture of women, but that doesn't mean that a lot of the things that we're not talking about don't negatively impact men as well. You talked about things like the shared reality. At the end of the day, we're all workers and we're all existing under the same sort of oppressive structures, but the difficulty of creating these gendered barriers is that then workers have this divide that makes them disrespect each other, not try to understand each other, not try to reach across and bridge that gap. And so you don't just have a gender being disrespected, but because certain industries are gendered in a particular way, entire industries are disrespected. People don't understand the necessity of some very basic revolutionary tactics, like the fact that people need to know how to cook. People need to know how to cook. People need to know how to monitor and take care of children. People need to know how to engage with medicine, right? Like, these are very basic, simple things that are necessary to a functioning society, and they're seen as irrelevant in comparison to shooting guns, which is very important, but you also need to know how to boil an egg. Like, you just basic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, historically, in times of crisis, there are women stepping up and they're going to sew the soldiers' wounds together. Do they have medical experience? No. But do they have sewing experience? Yes. That's a caretaker. That's a homemaker. That's a woman. That's a woman.
And guys, I literally get so ahead of myself. That's one thing about me. But in here, I also wanted to note, we can see how important caretaking is, like, as an industry, and how it's not even necessarily always a gendered exploitation, because when, again, we look at U.S. history, child labor is such a major mechanism of the exploitation of women, and like relying on them to do all of the caretaking, like you were talking about earlier. We can see how rich white women of the planter class were telling their black slaves to take care of the children for them. So there is a way that we see that it's not even necessarily gendered, but it still reflects in this way.
Real quick, I just want to expand. The pink collar, which is the service industry, primarily ran by like women or those who are queer, non-binary. We see them underpaid, disrespected as well. So that's another example, but I know that we touched on that a little bit ago.
And like looking down on caretaking as something that, first of all, men are taken away from caretaking. And then they're told that it's not something that they should respect or care about, and that it's fine that they're being taken away from caretaking, so they look down on the fact that it's a woman's job. But that's ridiculous. It's incredibly unhealthy for one individual to be expected to, like, this is even disregarding the fact that, like, historically, a child rearing is a collective act, right? To have one person being made to do all of that, it creates an unhealthy home, it creates an unhealthy culture, and then you have people asking the question of, like, why are people's mental health so bad? You have those men's rights activists that ask, why is men's mental health so bad? And it's like, the mental health crisis exists because we literally don't have a healthy society. We don't have families, we don't have collective child rearing, like, we literally just have, like, one person in the home made to do all the work, and even then, not really, because at this point, you have so many parents where both of them are at work, or there's, like, and then there's no money for childcare, and it's just a ridiculous amalgamation of contradictions.
And they're each taking care of each other, one down the other. It's horrific. I was gonna say another thing in regards to I was calling it the shared reality earlier. It's, oh my gosh, what was it? Oh my gosh, I was going to talk about how capitalism exploits us uniquely, so like women are expected to do the double shift. We're expected to do our 9 to 5 or whatever side hustle we got, and then go home and take care of the kids. And the men are expected to work however many hours, 10, 12, I don't know, honestly, how many hours are men working? I'm not a man, but...
8 to 12.
Yeah, right? It's okay, so they're expected to do that hour, or to do all those hours of work, and then there's like a societal pressure to like, you don't really get to decompress with your friends. The closest you could probably get is like go to a bar and get drunk, but then like 10 years down the road, how are you
Liver
feeling?
cancer.
Exactly. Like they're destroying communities on both ends, and they're moving in different ways as a distraction. And that's something I feel like we're really trying to point out.
Oh, real quick, before we move on, you can see in the Soviet Union, like I love stats, and the men in the Soviet Union got up to like 44% of the household. They would do 44% of the household duties. You can look that up. I can't remember where that's from, but yeah.
So I just want to emphasize with all of this, these limited roles that women are expected to occupy, or rather seeing these roles as a limitation, harms the collective of humanity, not just women. And liberals benefit from these divides as well. They encourage these divides as well. Gloria Steinem, who is considered one of the founders of American feminism, admitted to working with the CIA. And I think it was something that Kali said in the introduction, which is that these this academia is increasingly trying to push us against each other, is increasingly trying to like create this war, this gender war, and we fight that instead of ever just trying to take a look towards other members of the working class and unite with them among a shared common interest, which would be destroying these. I'm like, what can I say? But like destroying these rich pedophiles. Like these people are exploiting women, they're exploiting children, they're exploiting men. They are the shared enemy of humanity. And rather than looking to them while they drop bombs on, it doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter what race you are, when they drop those bombs in Palestine, in Iran, they are not like trying. They're not asking to protect any certain gender. You know what I mean? And rather than focusing on them, we look towards each other and we're like, but this guy said something I don't like, and this girl has blue hair and she's too woke. And it's like it's destructive. It's a cancer.
Yeah, actually, you worded it perfectly. Sorry.
So then all of this is kind of trying to answer the question of then how do women, if we do see these differences, right, how do they actually relate to the vanguard? There are certain industries that women are particularly relevant to, right? And I went over the concept of kind of non-militant labor earlier. And again, what that looks like is going to be caretaking, it's going to be teaching, it's going to be medicine, it's going to be these things that are incredibly integral to the function of society. There's the social reasonings behind the relevance of women to the vanguard, which is just that, to be quite honest, it's important to be social socialists, is something that we always say, and the social socialist needs to understand how to interact with people. And if you don't know how to interact with 50% of the population, to be quite frank, it's even men that are well-adjusted are going to find it difficult to talk to you. The vanguard needs a quote-unquote reserve army. It needs support from those who occupy homemaker roles, right? Because when you're fighting a revolutionary period, it's not just about your guns. It's about the people who are willing to harbor you, right? And we see this particularly throughout the Cuban Revolution and other revolutionary struggles throughout history. It's just, to me, we actually need to consider what are our material necessities that we see, right? And a lot of these are occupied by women. We cannot, organizations and revolutions need these roles. And let me make something very clear. Yes, we should recruit based on merit and not based on gender. That's how we should bring people into organizing. But at the same time, we have to create environments that are welcoming to all that have merit. We need tactics that reach across gendered divisions, and different comrades will take on different roles. As I said earlier, there are some speakers out there who are absolutely incredible when speaking to mostly men. There are speakers that are going to be very incredible when speaking to mostly women, and both of these people have a role, just as both men and women have a role. We have to understand not just our ideals about like being like a super cool like ass kicker, like we also need to understand how to run a society, how to maintain an organization. Things that, in my experience organizing, women have primarily taken on. Men are not the enemy, and we do need to be united, but men have to understand those differences in order to unite with women, just as women need to understand those differences in order to unite with men. And so if we have an idea of a perfect society where gender oppression doesn't exist and there's no such thing as a gendered barrier, which I don't think we'll ever, maybe not, maybe, who's to say? I'm not an oracle. I'm also a communist, so I understand I'm here to analyze material reality, not give you a prediction of the future most of the time, but I have been right on everything that is happening in this Iran war, I'll tell you that. So I'm so sorry, I make too many jokes, getting back to my point. If we want that society, if that is an ideal of society that you have, first you must acknowledge how we can organize across these gaps, and therefore the gaps need to be acknowledged, right? At the end of the day, the idea that there is something of womanly labor and manly labor, a lot of that is a false distinction made up to separate workers. But as long as those distinctions do exist, we need to ask the question of how do we answer to them? And so that would be what I have prepared. I don't know if you guys want to cut in or...
I want to cut in.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that like the advocacy that you're like having for women in the household, especially when harboring revolutionaries and stuff that took place, it's also, that's not like discounting or like saying that women can't participate in military or bear arms, of course, as we've already noted. Like that's not what you're advocating for.
That's not what I'm getting at all. Like women can shoot guns, guys. Like women can shoot guns, women can do militant things. It's just the fact that like things that are considered unmilitant or womanly, despite the fact that they're so impactful and so important, are seen as lesser. And it impacts men too, because you see people like make fun of men, like single fathers, right, that are like trying to raise their child. And it's like, that's not an embarrassing thing to do.
I was gonna say just more on the like gender divide in the workplace. As I mentioned earlier, I am a carpenter, and in the past 3 years that I've been doing this job, the only women I've ever worked with are designers. I'm not working with women carpenters, and that's not to say that like I'm super dope and all these female designers are kind of like whack because why aren't they carpenters? I'm saying that my job could not get done without those women. I couldn't do what I need to do. I couldn't make my money. I couldn't pay my rent if those women weren't giving me those designs. If those women weren't standing with me. Like it takes two to tango.
And they're gonna make some incredible propaganda posters.
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah, so I guess if I was going to give final thoughts on my section before we open it up to a Q&A from mine, and then we're going to open it up to a larger Q&A in general, I would just say primarily what I am trying to get across. I think I kind of already gave my final words. Is there anything that's unclear?
All right, thank you, Georgie. Let's get it up for Georgie. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we do have time for a short Q&A for Georgie's section specifically, but also this is the end of our speaking portion, so I'm also all right with if anyone has questions in general or things beyond this section as well. We can have a raising of hands if anyone has any thoughts or questions. Yes.
So
unpaid for my grandparents who are both disabled. They can't get around. I live with them full time. I drive them to all their doctor's appointments. Again, it's not necessarily a choice I feel I have. You know, it's a responsibility. Exactly. Not necessarily. I got other women in my family who could take it up, but you know, I have the best car, so.
There it is. But what I was asking is, working in a male-dominated industry, I've noticed things like I manufacture medical tubing. I have to be able to lift 120 pounds up to my head. I don't know a whole lot of other women that can do that. We could make the school smaller and more manageable, but the average guy can lift 120 pounds up to his head. Have you noticed in carpentry or in any other male-dominated industry that you've worked in any systemic failures in the industry that could be solved to include women?
So the question is, are there any solutions to the male-dominated industries that have limitations against women?
Yeah, you guys are gonna love me. I'm also disabled. So I would say that the biggest thing is to understand what accommodations you need for yourself. Because in addition to being a woman, like I can't lift certain things up to my head if I'm just lifting with my arms. Yeah. We build furniture. So I gotta but if I can kick it up, if I can get it onto my thigh, I can get it onto my shoulder. Like, there's things that you have to understand, and there's going to be workarounds, but there's going to be workarounds for every field. Like, when I'm taking care of my grandparents, they are significantly heavier than me. I'll flex right now. You know, like, I'm not the strongest individual, but it's on me. If they fall, it's on me to get them up, you know? It's on me to help those EMTs get them in because it's hard, you know? Like, you have to be able to know what needs to be done and understand that what works for somebody isn't going to work for you. My boss can lift things like crazy. It blows my mind. He's in his 50s. But I make the accommodations, and if somebody has something to say, it's like, okay, but is the job getting done or not?
I also think it's okay that there's certain things that are limiting, right? Like, I think the fact that there are only a few people that can lift 120 pounds is like, then those people should be the ones taking on the job. Right, it makes things more convenient when you have, you know, those larger concentrations of material. And I think that when we talk about changes that we'd make to certain industries, I think that, you know, you can look at China and the USSR and these incredible advancements that they were able to make under those conditions because it became about efficiency and not about profit. Right, and so if we were actually to have an economy that was geared towards efficiency and the protection of the people, then we could look at what a realistic accommodation that is actually efficient and productive could look like.
Sorry, part of what made it so efficient was the fact that 40% of 40+%, like you guys said, of women worked in STEM programs. They were part of the manufacturing and design. They didn't have to go through the process of saying, hey, women can't lift 120 pounds up to their head because women were part of the design process. They didn't have to go back after a woman was hired.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
You can finish.
You're next.
All right. Next question in the back.
It's not so much a question, but I was just following up with like what was discussed earlier about like accommodations to make jobs more equitable. And I'm glad Georgie brought up like the productive forces because like if we're talking about lifting things, I mean literally just robots, right? Like that's something that super equalizes the workforce because like why does anybody really need to lift 120 pounds above their head when you could just have a robot do that? But under capitalism, right, the robots are here to monitor you to make sure that you're like following all the laws, to track you down if you're doing something wrong, right? But like as an example, my partner, she's like a CNA, so like she helps out in a hospital and has to lift patients. And yeah, she's strong enough to do that, but there are some patients who are larger. And like while the human component is super important for like healthcare in terms of like improving patient outcomes, like you could just have a robot pick somebody up so that they can do all of the things, you know? Like that's something that is huge that I think like China sets a really great example for. But again, the United States, because we're run by capitalists, those robots, those automations are used instead to make sure that we all toe the line.
I just want to say we can exploit people more than robots too.
It's true.
Oh, yes. Harold, come on over with the mic.
Oh my God.
So-
Hey, this guy's the chapter executive of the
Yeah.
Florida chapter of the American Communist Party. Harold.
I wanted to ask, are there any communist women or progressive women from history that you particularly look to as an example or admire in any way?
Oh, you're right. Sorry. I mean, for me, I think it's hard to find the perfect communist woman example to provide.
I got a list.
Georgie's got a list though, so she'll get back to you. I'll say that being able to analyze texts with critical thinking and also with understanding the historical context and the context you're living in is important. So I have, in my notes, I have quoted Lisa Vogel. I have quoted Alexandra Kolanyi. I've quoted some more modern authors like Johanna Brenner. I think it's about the context. Oh, there you are. I think it's about the context of what they're providing. But that's what I would say.
I can't remember her name, but honestly, the sharpshooter from Russia who shot 300 Nazis. Oh, that's her actually. What's her name? Pavlichenko.
I have a few. So Krupskaya, and this is going to be so offensive that I even refer to her like this, but Lenin's wife. And she was basically responsible for editing and translation, and so much of what we read of Lenin today, it was her responsibility and her role. All of the words that you read, went through her hands. And I think that again shows you don't necessarily need to be the main face of someone that's doing something to have a very important role in producing it. So she's one of my number ones. Krupskaya, obviously you already mentioned Kollontai. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but Tamara Bunke from the Cuban Revolution, as well as Asada Shakur, just because I feel like she has kind of a philosophical or psychological understanding of how to organize as a revolutionary woman that has really, really inspired me, and particularly her stories about the necessity of communists getting high off of the revolution and things like that. Yeah, she's been a big inspiration for me.
Mila, did you have your hand raised? Okay.
I can just. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, but for the camera.
If it's something I can repeat, you
Bro, for everyone's sake, just come up to the mic.
This is Coach Milo of Praxis Submission Fighting.
Before I ask my question, actually, I wanted to give Comrade Kali a shout out. We were talking about women in militant roles, and this comrade actually destroyed a submission grappling bracket tournament. She actually beat 2 men in that tournament, submitted them by guillotine. So. Kali. Yeah, Kali the Crusher. But my question was, as women organizers and communists, what brought you to the American Communist Party? It's a party that is constantly smeared and lied against as if these other parties aren't riddled with sex pests. So what brought you into the ACP as women?
Hey guys, me here. So I mean, it wasn't anything related to my identity as a woman, right? To me, the primary contradiction for a communist in the 21st century United States is imperialism, and the way in which the ACP has engaged with this topic, has defended imperialized countries, has defended countries that are under attack by NATO and under attack by the United States, and showing complete support for these countries, even when it's not necessarily of social benefit to us, that was the most important thing for me, because the whole reason I even came to Marxist-Leninism in the first place was seeing the rampant Russophobia, the rampant xenophobia, the rampant Islamophobia, and how these things were not being answered to by the general quote-unquote American left. And so that's why I came to the ACP. It's because they are the only communist party that seems to have a sincere care for the imperialized people of the world. And at the end of the day, that is of direct benefit, not just to imperialized women to be defended, but it's of direct benefit to those who want capitalism to fall. Because imperialism is kind of how capitalism sustains itself. You reject imperialism, you see the destruction of capitalism come with that, and the destruction of capitalism is what will even give us the possibility of fighting for a better future for women. And so if we can't eliminate step 1, then I have no idea why I would be talking about step 3.
Oh. We're gonna just answer real quick. I was just gonna say that I joined the ACP despite all the insults, I guess, or like the wrong accusations that are given online when it comes to like how women are depicted, queerphobia, or whatever the heck they're putting on there. I've seen the action like take precedence, you know, like I know my comrades, I know the comrades that are in here. And that's why I joined, because I can see that like whatever is being spewed online is not what is correct. When like you can go to these events, you can meet the people who are coming to these events and actually discuss and find out what we're about, because we're not about what everyone is saying online. It's completely incorrect. And also, if we're real about joining a vanguard party, like this is the American Communist Party, it's not NGO funded. This is not going to be lobbied, so why not try it out? And if you have criticisms, bring that struggle and see what happens, because maybe that criticism will be overturned.
So my introduction to the ACP was actually not online. I had never heard of them through the internet, but some ACP Florida chapter members came to a mutual aid distribution that I was a part of, and I talked to them a little bit about it because I had never heard of the party before. And they pitched it like it was a worker-founded, a worker-oriented, you know, this is the party for the workers, which I really felt was lacking. I'd organized for a few years, and you know, like I never joined the PSL, I never joined the DSA, but like upon research on them, you know, it was like I see where the money is coming from. I see where it's going. I see that there's no changes being happening. There's no direct critiques of capitalism ever coming from these organizations. You know, it's all identity politics, and like again, that's not going to solve the core contradictions right now. And so I talked. Georgie had joined before me. I talked a little bit to Georgie. And I was like, I guess I heard they don't have women. And Georgie was like, dude, I'm in the party. What do you mean they don't have women? And I was like, okay, I guess you're right. And Georgie was like, if you have any criticisms, you can levy them in the party. And that's exactly how that happened. So
yeah, and was this the event where they brought like 20 full rotisserie chickens?
They brought so many rotisserie chickens, guys.
Like it was so crazy. Thank you so much, by the way. I think Jameer's in here right now. How's it going?
Shout
man?
out.
Yeah, there's definitely a few things I want to add onto that as well. Number one, I'm literally always saying it, and you and Sasha both just said it as well. If you have a criticism of an organization from the outside, but you generally support the program, it would make much more sense to invest yourself in the program internally than it would to make these, like, while the ruling class is attacking a communist party from outside, it would make much more sense to have these conversations as a party than it would to just kind of join this shit-slinging with the bourgeoisie, right? And then at the same time, the ACP has a much better mechanism of democratic centralism and self-criticism than the PSL or the DSA. And I think that's another fundamental component as well. As Michael Parenti said, well, they say the revolution has to be perfect. It has to be flawless. Well, that isn't my criteria. What happened to the children that couldn't eat? What happened to the children that couldn't read? Right? Like, that is the criteria. That's the fundamental thing that we're all uniting around. And if I have an issue with the way someone carries themselves in public, or I have an issue with, like, oh, I didn't like how they did this one thing. Like, I thought that they could have sent a message earlier in the chat to help me organize this event. Like, I'm just going to tell them that. I'm just going to rely on the mechanism of criticism and self-criticism, which is a necessary part of being a communist, rather than join some ridiculous online hate train and become the Fed's favorite poster.
I wanted to add to that as well. So I think, I was first introduced to the ACP not necessarily through my own organic Twitter findings, but through other comrades that were telling me about it during its formation. And I feel like the initiation and the creation of the party as a separate entity coming from the CPUSA's dissolution, that was really meaningful to me. I think that perfectly exemplified criticism and self-criticism. I think it's really important for us to understand that we're not reformists, that we're not sitting by and waiting for other people to make decisions for us, or hoping that we can change things from the inside of a system that's broken. And I think that as Marxist-Leninists, we are revolutionaries, and there's a lot of parties out here that are happy and comfortable with being reformists and trying to play the system as it exists and not really interested in putting into the work to change it and to create something new. And that was something that I felt like the ACP from its conception imagined and was able to embolden. But in my own sort of relationship with the woman question, I feel like I've experienced a lot of sexism. I've experienced a lot of things that probably women have had shared experiences with at the hands of men that aren't comfortable. But I'm a realist, and I understand that I'm not expecting every single person in the United States across all states to think the same way that I think. But if they have the same united principles of especially international unity, anti-imperialism, and just a real true devotion to creating a better world, I don't have the defeatist perspective that I won't be able to win them over. I have the sort of inspiration that once we actually get to work together, if there are people that have social incongruencies or things that might make me uncomfortable, I'm pretty confident in that our work will show the difference and show who's serious about changing things and actually organizing and coming together for the future. So it's not difficult for me to accept people for where they're at and have hope that they'll change into something better.
And the reality in this, clap for Kali, because incredible. The reality is we want to win the working class and we want to win the world, and ACP is the winning party, right? That's it.
Any further questions? Yeah. Or comments?
We're forgetting Frank.
You already got the mic, don't worry.
Okay. All right. What I really want, I don't know, I'm just interested now that we're here, is your thoughts on abortion. Should it be legalized? How will abortion look like under socialism? Because, for example, you have some countries, like example Cuba, so abortion is legal. There, you can get one very, very easy, in Venezuela, abortion is not legal, and it's rooted in their Catholic understanding. They have liberation theology, socialism of the 21st century, as coined by Hugo Chavez. Venezuela is not a Marxist-Leninist country per se, but it is, socialism. It is a communist. They're basically going there. But so how is it? How do you see progressivism, conservatism in this lens? In America, will America have abortion? Will it not have abortion? How is it going to look like?
It's going to be up to American workers and American women, right? Because across the party, we do have varying social views and we come from varying religious backgrounds. I think at the end of the day, what the workers want is what the workers get. Right, and so if the workers are for abortion, and that is what is instantiated in our culture, which is, to be honest, what it looks like, then that's likely going to be the result. I think we're much more comparable to Cuba than we are to other countries, to be honest.
I would say, again, it's hard to predict the future. We can make our best assumptions. It is important to take into account these other communist countries and their decisions that they made their social standings, how that impacted, society at large. And obviously, and again, in our culture, like, women have access to abortions, but not really. So, like, it's, again, like a secondary question. It's not something for us to get too caught up in at the end of the day. If some of my comrades are like, I would never want to get an abortion, I would never argue with them. That's their choice. That's their business. They hate imperialism. I hate imperialism, and that's what I care about,
And also at the same time, we focus so heavily on this abortion question, but at the same time that we focus on the abortion question, we're not asking, like, what is making women or people in general feel like they can't have children. Like, we have to establish a better economic world before we can even, because what does choice even look like under capitalism when there's no such thing as choice, right? Like, pro-choice or pro-life or anti-life or anti-choice. It's like capitalism is not pro-life or pro-choice. So it kind of becomes something very difficult to talk about because we haven't lived under a reality that's anything but exploitative, that's anything but horrendous. To take, I could go. Take it away, Sasha.
All right. Yeah. Oh, yes. Just one real quick thing. This is where the difference in culture really does lie. So if obviously our culture asks for abortion to be presented and approved throughout the country, then that's what it takes. Obviously, every country is going to be different. And as time goes on, socially, we're going to evolve into different understandings. So obviously, if we do have more childcare and we do have a different perspective and want to have more children, then maybe, we just don't know, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Frank?
What's up? So I don't have a question necessarily, but I do have something I want to add to the discussion based of kind of sparked by you guys talking about class as the primary contradiction and, like, the way that the economic basis creates or, like, affords this inequality, right? And it makes me think, go back to your question, right? Like, whatever bodies exist to create these regulations in your industry, they exist for the purpose of gradering super profits, right? It's not about, even if you, and we've seen, like, in their presentation today that the we've seen that under socialist countries, like, these kind of social questions or considerations, like, can be solved or even through grading the mode of production, right? But even if we could get that specific problem fixed of, like, making it so that this thing, this, like, problem of, like, not considering that not all women or not all people are able to lift 120 pounds, right? I know damn sure that y'all aren't getting paid enough to be lifting those 120 pounds on the daily all the time, right?
What's enough?
Enough.
Enough is a house, so we have to read capital by Karl Marx.
Yeah. But enough is going to be based off of, like, what I mean by enough is that you are creating value by your labor, and that value is only that value that you create as a human is the only way that these corporations, these Bezos, these Musks of the world are able to have all that, like, capital accrual that they have, right? So when I say enough, I say that you should be able to feed yourself, you should be able to take care of your family, you should be able to have these things and have these luxuries, right?
Reasonably, if I'm an unencumbered worker, I should be able to live well.
Yeah.
No, that's not the case, because these manufacturing industries now are competing with Arby's that pays the same starting wage as our assembly department.
That's what I'm saying.
$90
You don't lift 120 pounds at Arby's.
So there are a lot of days that I'm at work and I feel like I'm beat to death. And on top of that, I also feel like an Alexa that was left out in the room that spoke out of turn because I'm the only woman.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm it. It's just me. I don't even get a passing glance at another woman once a day.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of I get the braiders in and I have to remind them that these were made for men, and men on average are about 6 inches taller than me. I have my arms inside the braider. It's uncomfortable. It scratches when I leave. I have to have them take the feet off. I have to send in tickets. I have to do all of these things because they don't have any women there.
Yeah.
It's like the book Lean In. Sorry, I'm taking up your whole fucking
Under socialism, no one will have to do any of that.
Yeah, so real. But it's
We're
like,
good.
yeah, you're the whole thing that they said was that like as a woman you were part of like a super exploited class, but the exploited class is the proletariat, the workers, right? So you're feeling an extra brunt of that being a woman.
I think it was Georgie or Zarina that mentioned like the women entering like male-dominated industries isn't necessarily the solution to our problems. Also, you had a question?
On the abortion question for the party, I would hope that under American communism, we could eliminate as much as possible abortion, not by force of law, but by addressing and eliminating the reasons why women have to get abortions. I suspect are mainly economic these days.
Yeah, I would say that I'm pretty in unity with that. The goal is not to necessarily, I mean, like, again, I can't predict the future, but I would say, yeah, the goal is to uplift the conditions of women who want to be mothers so that way they are able to actually become the mothers that they want to be, you know?
Dude, all low-key, sorry.
Yeah, again, but we can't predict the future ultimately, but we can hope to influence, you know?
We're talking about criticism and self-criticism. I'm just gonna make the crit right now. I don't know why men want us to talk about abortion so much. Yeah. It's fine. We honestly consider it pretty irrelevant to the conversation topic at hand. Secondary, exactly.
Hi, I have a couple of things to say. If you are struggling with abortion, sorry.
Oh my God!
No. Just as a resource, Costco has Plan B for $7. Just if you didn't know. You said the DSA and like you kind of criticized it a little bit. I know like a little bit about them, and I was like interested. And then you said a couple criticism about them. I want to know like where they went wrong and what does NGO funding mean?
I think we can all answer this a little bit, but I'll kick it off. So quickly, NGO stands for non-government organization. And these are usually funded by tax-deductible donations from like super billionaires and whatnot, and philanthropies. Sorry, I don't know the real words, but so yes, they're these big non-government organizations that are given these big amounts of money, tax-deductible for the donators. So like, I don't really know what that means. I'm not sure about taxes, but just to be honest. So they have all this money, and then they are going to feed all these homeless people with it, and they're gonna like build all these houses for homeless people, and then they're gonna like make all these soup kitchens for homeless people, and then nothing actually materially changes or happens. And so that's why we are super against that as a party. We don't want to be funded by these people who are funded by corrupt weirdos and dish out hollow promises, and they don't fulfill anything. I don't know if Georgie wants to take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it very well, but there's also the concept that, like, because these NGOs are doing something, the government doesn't have to take responsibility. So you have a bunch of different disparate organizations all being funded by, like you said, these weirdos, and they're not actually held accountable to a centralized force, unlike if it was, like, if you're not getting proper healthcare from like your NGO, then you go talk to like your one NGO, and then like, or like you know, it's very separate, these struggles, right? If your government is supposed to be the one providing you proper healthcare and they're not, then the entire population can point to one centralized figure that is not answering the that's like not properly answering to what they said they were going to do, right? And so I think that's a big component of it as well. And then when it comes to just the DSA in general, you know, like we said, my primary stance at least is one of anti-imperialism, and the DSA has consistently been like a Big Tent organization that not only works with and endorses Democrats who to me represent nothing but a party of genocide. I can't see them as anything but genocidaires. You have them endorsing that party, trying to make people work with that party, a party that is a dead end. Like, let's be realistic. Anyone who saw the release of like the Epstein files and the genocide in Gaza and then is still continuing to tell you to endorse Democrats or endorse politicians aligned with a duopoly is your enemy, is 100% an enemy of the working class. Like, I do not even consider it even a modicum of a legitimate political tactic. It's actually ridiculous on its face. So you have that, right? But then you also have the fact that so many people in the DSA, there was that question of whether or not they would recognize like a Palestinian state. And it was like almost 50-50, the votes on that. Not only that, but then obviously you have like the insane amount of hatred for Russians that comes out of the DSA. You have the insane amount of hatred for Iranians. You have this insane hatred for really any sort of like culture from the quote unquote East. It's a very Orientalist party, to be quite frank. And I think there's just a lot of things that come out of it that are, I'm like, how mean can I be about the DSA? But, you know, they're pretty disgusting, right? And I don't think that doesn't mean that there is any good comrades that are, like, there's always good people trapped everywhere, right? But the actual maintenance of that organization and their leadership and the politic that they espouse officially and their party program, I consider it reprehensible.
We can look at the successful politicians that came out of DSA and look at Mamdani. A lot of people don't know that his mom was actually in the Epstein files as well. Like, Epstein not only participated and went to an Epstein party, Epstein threw a party for her. So research that.
I just want to add something, I guess, to the NGO part. I think there's a lot of history, or there's a lot of like media push to join nonprofits or to support NGOs and all of those things. Like they mentioned, the majority of NGOs are funded by like billionaire philanthropies and all of that stuff. But I think that in itself proves that they will never be the solution. They're always just a Band-Aid. And a lot of the times they're never going to actually point to the reason behind things. Like, they will want pats on the back and like all of this media support or just public support for solving a someone's issue today. Like, they are hungry today, I'm going to give you food today. But they'll never say why you're hungry or like who's responsible for your lack of food as a right or things like that. And I think that that's like the distinction, is that there's never going to be any true solution through NGOs. They're just going to continue keeping people in line with like doing small work that makes them feel better about themselves. That's like the main distinction. They'll never get to the root of the problem.
I'll keep it quick. Sorry, I just want to jump in as a man to say something about the NGO thing. I think what you guys said is, you guys said is 100% true. The NGOs are never going to point to the root cause. They're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on the gaping wounds of capitalism. But I would go even further than that. Not only that, but a lot of these NGOs, their purpose is to be actively ideologically harmful and materially harmful. Yes. Like in the 80s, people started to catch on to the fact that the CIA was a piece of shit imperialist organization. So what the Reagan administration did was replaced a lot of what the CIA was doing with the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. And that's classified as an NGO, and billionaires can donate to it and get tax write-offs. So the second we start letting NGOs fund our organization, we're cooked.
Also, something else to add really quick too, they siphon out revolutionary spirit too. They like purposefully go after people who have, tendencies towards organization or tendencies towards like anti-establishment, anti-capitalist views, and they bring them into their NGO world because they have the funding to pay $20 an hour, $25 an hour. And so now these people are brought into the NGO world. There's like a wonderful, podcast and research on the nonprofit industrial complex, but the groundings episode, look it up. Anyway, they purposefully go after people to take them out of like some sort of potentially revolutionary organization and bring them into the NGO world, because otherwise they'd be working at Target for like $12 an hour. But with this NGO, they can be paid $20, $25 an hour and think they're doing something, impactful. So I think that's important to note too, like the individual impact. Yes.
So I wanted to ask, and I apologize, that it's going to be slightly antagonistic. You have a woman in the military here. You had a woman who was very clearly a part of the Vanguard Party on the Cuba slide. You talked about
Yeah, so I think I answered this question a few times, and when we're talking about these advancements that are made in socialist countries, it's because they're socialist countries. It's because they've advanced into a new mode of production that they can even sort of reframe things in this way. When we're living under capitalism and we're trying to talk about I don't know, like reforms to certain industries, it's just I can't give you an accurate prediction of what that would look like because we live under a system that is for profit, that's not for benefit of humanity, right? And so then if we were to enter socialism, I think that question would become extremely relevant as it has been relevant in Cuba and China and the USSR and et cetera. And once we get through this era, right, obviously my segment was not about how we exist under socialism. That was more Sasha's segment. It was more how do we get women to support the advancement of socialism. That's, I guess, kind of why I answered it in that way. It's just because I really want to emphasize the importance of the fact that there are industries that women are primarily in that are very important industries. And, you know, whenever people ask, well, what about getting women into male-dominated industries? Do I think that's insignificant? No, but there are these industries that are female-dominated that we're just not asking questions about, and so that's why I wanted to reframe it in that way.
Yeah, again, I don't think any one of us said, like, if you can't do something, don't try, you know? It was, how can we make this the most efficient process as possible? And that's gonna look different for everybody. Also, like the statistics and stuff where we were showing women thriving under socialist societies, as Georgie said, like that was after socialism. And it feels, at this point in the modern reality of working women, it feels more natural to meet the women where they're at, where earlier in my slide we lost like over 400,000 women in the workforce, and 30% of those women just had to take care of their kids. They couldn't afford childcare because a year's worth of childcare is like the same cost as college tuition. It's crazy these days. And so when we talk about meeting the women where they're at, we're not saying they have to be stuck in the home forever. We're saying, like, I see you where you're at right now. Like, how can I make what you're doing right now easier, and then how can I bring you into this vanguard party, into this revolution, into this socialist society, you know? So that would be my answer.
I think also like AI, artificial intelligence, is something that we want to strive for being put in the place of factories to help with that like situation. Instead of the current use that it has, like
I mean, I find that its best uses thus far have been in medical research, not so much in manufacturing. But the role of the worker, and in my case, I don't see a role for AI in my job. I don't see how it could create, design, engineer, or manufacture medical tubing. And I wouldn't want a tube going through my body that had been designed, engineered, or manufactured by a random word generator.
So there's different types of artificial intelligence, right? Like, we're not saying ChatGPT is going to make things in factories. But I do want to emphasize, when it comes to a socialist future, we want things to be comfortable and easy, right? When it comes to jobs that require lifting a certain amount of heavy things, right? Robots, AI, because robots are AI. I think AI these days is like kind of used to mean like people plagiarizing their essays or like generating AI art, and it's like AI has actually always been around in society. Robots that are able to lift machines, that is literally artificial intelligence. So I think that's what Sasha was referring to. And we want those things to be able to happen. The issue with things like AI under capitalism is that it's taking jobs away from workers and putting them on the street. But under socialism, when you have things like guaranteed access to housing, then jobs that are physically laborious in this way being taken away is not a negative. It's actually a positive for humanity. It frees you up. I think it was Karl Marx that said, like, the less that you eat and the less that you go to the play and the less fun that you have and the less art that you make, the the better it is for capitalism, because the more work that you do. But under socialism, we want things to be better for everyone. We want you to have more time to make art. We want you to have more time to eat. We want you to have more time to go to the play, right? And so in that way, we want to eliminate these tasks that people have to spend 8 to 12 hours on. And that will include automation.
I actually have something to add on to that. I'm a performer myself. I'm a cellist, and I guess I can say I'm a little bit advanced, but it's really hard to get lessons now. You have to pay about $75 an hour for a lesson, one lesson. And I can't afford that, so I kind of have to teach myself now, and I'm getting to a point where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do. And also, there's not a lot of like classical performers anymore. And because it's getting more and more expensive to create instruments, and if you go to the violin shop in Tampa, like a cello is like, an advanced cello is probably like 15 grand. So yeah.
In the Soviet Union and the DPRK and China, like as much as people want to act like communists like love dole and gray and hate fun, like the importance of cinema and the importance of plays and the importance of art and the importance of choir is like so deeply emphasized within these countries. And I think, you know, when we think about creating like a healthier society, which is something that I was referencing earlier, that's going to be a major component.
One of my favorite composers would have to be Shostakovich, because his pieces are very emotional, and I think it's Quartet number 8. That one's really like emotional, and I'm not sure how he was during that and why they picked specifically him, but he did a great job with his composing skills.
I'm glad we're on the topic of art, because my next question was going to be, what will happen to art in the idealistic future of, you know, a socialist? What, am I closer? Like a socialist, you know, future and stuff. Because in my opinion, I think that some of the greatest art that we have today is born from the struggles under capitalism and struggles under imperialism and stuff like that. So what will like happen to it? Like, what will it look like?
So I think that art produced within struggle has great value, but as does art produced by those who are respected and feel as though they have integrity in society. I don't know if you've ever looked into Eastern German art or Soviet art or Soviet choir music, North Korean cinema. You know, these are all produced under socialist countries, and it's, oh my gosh, okay, I have a lot. I really like cinema. I love the Red Detachment of Women from China. Guys, I'm not gonna pull up a list. I just want to make it very, very clear that like there is absolutely beautiful art that has come out of socialist countries. You can even think of the Moranbang Band from the DPRK, which is basically like a it's like a choir, right? It's also like Yes, it's a music assembly. And so they have, it's like all these different women play instruments and they sing, and like this is completely endorsed by the DPRK. It's like a cultural exchange that they provide with the rest of the world. I have so many favorite communist films. Soy Cuba's and the USSR's cinema, Battleship Potemkin from the USSR, which was like a pro-Soviet propaganda film, In the Heat of the Sun from China. All of this to say, art will not be eliminated under socialism, nor will it decrease significantly in quality. It has only increased in quality, to be realistic.
Art is funded more for the individual instead of like Hollywood, CIA-backed like films or art, I guess, you know. Like you can see a lot of Soviet films that are just like not really shown in the US, and they're very like, they're way ahead of their time. Like, go check out.
We have like Marvel, and like the USSR is like, come and see. It's over.
And also like some of the art that was over here for the Soviet women, if you can go back to that slide, like a lot of the art that is seen, or even the propaganda, like if you can go back to the propaganda slide. It's a lot more hopeful and optimistic versus like the advertisements or other depictions, even now, of like women So.
And North Korean art is really, really gorgeous. You should look into that.
And I was just gonna say, even if you haven't like looked into art like that before, it can be hard to imagine, you know, like what the possibilities could be because we've been so limited for so long. You know, life has sucked for generations and generations and generations. So like all of our best art is about like the struggle. But can you imagine like what the art will be created during the revolution, what art will be created after the revolution, what art will be created to like tell the story of the Vanguard Party, and like that seems like it could be pretty good.
Also, like a bunch of our best musicians just like get killed. So that's also
true.
a major component. It's like, imagine if people like John Lennon and Tupac Shakur like were actually able to live like full lives, and the art that they could have produced because of that. But we wouldn't know because of certain circumstances. They're no longer with us.
All right, y'all, we are getting to the end of our Q&A. Anyone have any final questions? I think we have time for maybe 2 or so questions regarding the woman question. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Anyone who has any thoughts lingering from the presentation? Yes. The speaker. So you don't just speak or you can say it out loud. Yeah.
I guess I'll speak loudly. Going back to what you said, Serena, like the 455 women who left the workplace in 2023, I think, like personally speaking, I saw a lot of trad wife like content being perpetrated like since 2023 until this day. I think because of that, people are not aware that the struggle is within capitalism and not within patriarchy. And what I mean by that is women will come home from like a 40-hour work week, and instead of analyzing what caused, you know, such tragedy in the week, like, oh my God, I'm tired, this is horrible, instead of blaming or analyzing capitalism, they'll be like, well, the easier option would be to go home. That is my other option. And I think that's only perpetrated through social media because it's the only option that we see. It's like, well, if you're not made for the workplace, you need to stay home. That's your only other role. So I just think that meetings like this are really important to like bring political education, make people aware of like the other options. So just shout out to you guys.
Thank you. I want to say really quickly about the trad wife is that like a lot of those influencers and stuff, those are bourgeois women. You know, that was never a working woman. The trad wife was never going to work. That was never her thing. And like a lot of times, because I'm pretty on TikTok, and so like I'll see trad wife content, but then I'll also see like struggling mothers with husbands who work. They like bike in heat and like cause themselves strokes, and there's kids who live with their grandparents, and this mom who works full time and does like cleans all the house and like does all the dishes and stuff, you know. That's the reality for working women. That's what you get. You're not going to be a trad wife. You can quit your job and go take care of your kids and it's going to suck.
There are trad wives that are like shown online having nannies, like secretly behind doors. They are LARPing. They are LARPers. They're LARPers.
Harold, do you have a question? Or no, you're scratching. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts regarding the woman question or the content of the presentations?
No other women of the ACP? Come on, y'all.
Oh, pressure.
Pressure.
No. Oh, going once, going twice, yes.
Man of the ACP.
Yeah, I'm a man, but I was just going to comment. Okay, so like automation in the workplace, I don't necessarily think people have to be automated out of it as much as the really hard, sucky parts of working can be automated. So I used to have a job where I would lift about 10,000 pounds of bullshit every day. And, you know, it kind of disabled my right hand for like a year doing it. And it would be nice if I could have like a little robot I could put shit on that would just lift it for me. And like specifically with like medical tubing, you could still do that. But how cool would it be if you had a little robot that could just lift it for you and just do the shitty part? And but like, you know, I think with like AI, like having something like that can use LiDAR or camera and just help you. And then you can do the really smart fulfilling creative part of the job. I think that's where like automation would kind of come into being helpful instead of dismissive for
And
women.
Also, you would have to work less hours, which would be cool.
Or you could do the cool part of the job more within the same amount of hours. You can make more medical tubes. And get paid well. Yeah, right. And get paid better.
And you have a house to go home to. And both men and women are doing housework. You know, it could be great, guys. It could be great.
Yes. Okay.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if I heard anything about the DPRK. I'm just curious if you guys have any insight into how you view the women question over there.
Okay, so my primary answer to this, so I've not looked in very specifically to how the DPRK has advanced rights for women. What I can tell you is how things are going in the Republic of Korea in the South versus how they're going in the North. Guys, it's not good. Okay, so I went to, I'm like really, like Iranian politic and like Korean politic, like I'm super invested, so it's a difficult question to answer because there's like a lot to get through. But in South Korea, you see increased femicide, you see increased sexual abuse of women, you see rampant exploitation within these industries that they're exporting out into the West. For instance, you can think of the Sungri scandal, I think back in 2019, which was this like male K-pop idol that was like trafficking a bunch of women through this bar, and like that's supposed to be like one of the major exports to the West is like the K-pop industry, right? And you see this like really disgusting, despicable sexual violence happening behind the scenes, and then at the same time you see this like the birth rate in South Korea is going way down because no one can afford to have children. You see like super increase. It's always been this way, especially since the Korean War. You see like alcoholism skyrocketing. On top of that, we talk about sexual violence towards women. Did you know that since the Korean War, because of the U.S.'s influence, that boys in South Korea get circumcised when they are teenagers? And that's something that they were, before there was even like medicine to make that a less painful procedure, like that was happening to them when they were 14 through 18, like in the 50s. Like that's the sort of violence that America is continuing to export onto occupied Korea. North Korea doesn't have that shit, okay? North Korea doesn't have all that, okay? They have like a much healthier society. They have ways that actually support women to take care of their children. They don't have this like insane sexual exploitation happening within these industries that are exporting people out to the West. They don't have this idea of like capitulating to Western values and capitulating to the Western economy that just continues to exploit their women. They're not like South Korea, which sucks up to Japan and the United States, while Japan has never apologized for the rape of comfort women. Like that's what's going on in the Koreas, okay? If there's anything to say about the DPRK in comparison to the ROK, it's the fact that the DPRK actually respects itself and therefore respects the women within its borders and actually protects them from this abhorrent, disgusting sexual violence that we're seeing across occupied Korea, while at the same time, American soldiers are raping and murdering Korean women. It's ridiculous. It is literally an occupied country where we continue to terrorize the women of that population, and then we have the audacity to condemn the DPRK because they won't let us in there. Well, look at what we do when we're in Korea. I really am very passionate about Korea.
All right, y'all. I think on that note, last call. All right, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. We appreciate y'all coming out to this event. I want to note that we have some stickers and books in the back. If anyone here is not familiar with the American Communist Party and this is maybe your first time interacting with us, I implore you to go on our website, acp.us, read our Constitution, read our program, learn more about what we're about. We're going to hang out here for a while. You're open to chatting with us, getting to know us a bit more, discussing more topics in depth if you'd like to. But for the sake of time, we're going to have to close it here. We appreciate y'all. Thank you. Shout out to all the speakers. ACP! 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 Beautiful. And we hope to just continue working towards building that communist socialist world all together so that all workers can enjoy the fruits of our labor and the beauty of what society can be. Thanks, y'all.